Haile Selassie I. Now that's a name that brings up some seriously strong images, right? A divine king, a global icon, and for some, a ruthless dictator. So today, we're going to try to unravel the enigma of Ethiopia's last emperor, a man who was literally worshipped by some and absolutely reviled by others. The big question is, how should history actually remember him?
So was he this messianic figure who was going to lead his people into a golden age? Or was he a despot who just clung to power no matter the cost? This is the question that has split historians and Ethiopians for decades. We're going to explore both sides of this coin and, let you make up your own mind.
And this is the paradox right at the heart of his entire legacy. On the world stage, he was an absolute champion of African unity, a symbol of resistance against colonialism. But back home, his rule was marked by some pretty brutal repression and the marginalization of entire ethnic groups. So how can one person be both a hero and a villain?
To really get the man, you have to understand where he came from. Born Tafari Makonnen, he was the heir to a dynasty that claimed it was directly descended from King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. This was a guy who truly believed he was destined to rule, and he wasn't about to let anything get in his way.
Okay, so his rise to power was basically a masterclass in political strategy. He was this incredibly shrewd and ambitious young man who knew exactly how to play the game of court politics. And as we're about to see, he was willing to do whatever it took to get to the very top.
From a teenage governor to the emperor of Ethiopia, his climb was just a testament to his incredible political skill. He completely outmaneuvered his rivals, consolidated his power while serving as regent for Empress Zewdutu, and by 1930, boom, he was the undisputed ruler of his country.
His whole mission, really, was to drag Ethiopia kicking and screaming into the 20th century. He knew that to survive in a world of powerful colonial empires, his country had to modernize. So he built schools, hospitals, infrastructure, and he made damn sure that Ethiopia had a seat at the big table of international politics.
But all these modernization efforts, they came with a pretty steep price. Sure, he introduced a constitution and a parliament, but honestly, that was mostly just for show. In reality, he held all the power. He was an absolute monarch trying to operate in a modernizing world, and that contradiction, well, it would eventually be his undoing.
So this world that he so carefully built was about to come crashing down. A new threat was rising in Europe, and it was going to put his leadership and his nation's very existence to the ultimate test.
In 1935, the unthinkable happened. Fascist Italy, under the brutal rule of Benito Mussolini, invaded Ethiopia. It was a war of pure conquest, and the Italians showed zero mercy. They used poison gas on soldiers and civilians, and they committed just unspeakable atrocities.
Forced into exile, Selassie became the voice of a nation under siege. He went before the League of Nations and delivered a speech that would go down in history. "It is us today," he warned them, "it will be you tomorrow." And his words were just a chillingly accurate prophecy of the world war that was right around the corner.
After the war, Selassie returned to Ethiopia a hero. He became a leading figure in the Pan-African movement, and he played a huge role in forming the Organization of African Unity. This guy was a global statesman, a true symbol of hope for a continent that was just starting to find its freedom.
But while the world was celebrating him as this great hero, a very, very different story was unfolding back in Ethiopia. It was a story of oppression, of violence, and of a people who were really suffering under the iron fist of their emperor.
You see, his government was pretty much built on a foundation of Amharic supremacy. Other ethnic groups, like the Oromo and the Harari, were systematically oppressed. Their languages were banned, their cultures were suppressed, and their lands were confiscated.
And this wasn't just a matter of policy. For many, it was a matter of survival. For the Oromo people, who are the largest ethnic group in Ethiopia, their very identity was under attack. For the Harari, it was basically a choice between submission and exile. This was a really dark chapter in Ethiopian history, one that often gets overlooked. So the cracks in his empire were really starting to show. You had decades of oppression, and you combine that with a crippling economic crisis, and you've got a powder keg just waiting to explode.
The end? It came not with a bang, but with a whisper. A whisper of hunger, of desperation, of a people who had just been pushed too far. A devastating famine swept through the country, and the government did basically nothing to stop it. 250,000 people,
Just let that sink in. That's how many men, women, and children starved to death while their emperor was living in luxury. It was a tragedy of epic proportions and, frankly, a crime that would not go unpunished.
The world was absolutely horrified. A British documentary exposed the truth about the famine, and these images of starving children were just a damning indictment of Selassie's rule. The military saw its chance. They seized power, and on September 12, 1974, the long reign of Haile Selassie came to a sudden end.
He died a prisoner in his own palace, a fallen king who had lost absolutely everything. But his story, it was far from over. In death, he would become even more powerful than he ever was in life.
You see, for a small but growing religious movement in Jamaica, he was more than just a king. He was a god. Inspired by the prophecies of Marcus Garvey, the Rastafarians came to believe that Haile Selassie was the second coming of Christ, the black Messiah who would lead them to salvation. So when he visited Jamaica in 1966, it was just a moment of pure ecstasy for the Rastafarian community. Thousands upon thousands of people flocked to the airport just to catch a glimpse of their living God. It was a day that would be forever etched in their memories, a day their faith was made real.
And today, his legacy is as contested as it's ever been. A statue of him now stands at the African Union headquarters, a testament to his role as a founding father of the organization. But for many, many Ethiopians, it's a painful reminder of a dark past, a symbol of a tyrant who built his empire on the backs of their ancestors.
So who was Haile Selassie? A visionary leader who fought for African independence, or a brutal dictator who oppressed his own people? Well, the truth, as it often is probably somewhere in between. His life is a powerful reminder that history is never a simple story of good versus evil, but a really complex tapestry of light and shadow. And it's up to each of us to decide how we'll remember the King of Kings.